infrastructure of feeling first. And in order to talk about that, talk about structure of feeling, which includes feeling, and then talk about this idea, right, this concept or theory of the selection and reselection of ancestors. Now, on the one hand, it appears kind of obvious and common sense that the ancestors we have are the ancestors we have, right? We come from various lineages. All of us have what they call in the United States, I don't know abroad, birth parents, whether or not we know them, right? We have birth grandparents and so on and so forth. It's just kind of how reproduction works, right, biologically. Then we also know that we have extensive kin groups based on whatever complicated social and cultural organization of kin groups we emerge from, right? So one might have a biological mother and one or two or three comadres, right, who participate fully in your formation, right, as a person, as a gendered or not individual coming up through a family, up through a community, up into a society. There are various forms of partnership. The most ordinary word to describe that is marriage, but it's not the only word to describe that, through which people make common cause in order to reproduce certain kinds of cultural and social expectations, and also, to some degree, but not necessarily, reproduce biologically a certain kin line, right? There's all of that. And then there are all of the myriad ways that cultures organize and explain these relationships internally and to the external world, right? We do this in this way for this reason. To say all of these things is to say that we are, in terms of our kinship relations, all products of and producers of structures, right? And in some senses, I'm the last structuralist, but then I'm the last everything, I think. Okay, so we're all parts of structures. And the structure is, we all know, because we've all read our Levi-Strauss, right? Everybody? Yeah. Okay. All right. So a structure is what? It is an institution or system which is closed. It doesn't mean it's impermeable. That's not what it means. To say something is closed does not mean that things can't go in and out of it. But within the structure, say a cultural structure, right? There are rules for transformation, right, within the structure that essentially try to guarantee the reproducibility of it. Now, whether this structure is a kin group, an institution of the state, a religious formation, makes no difference, right? Internally, they have the same processes, right? They have the same processes. So let's talk about like a heteronormative family in the United States of America, right? So, there's supposed to be this thing called marriage between something called a man and something called a woman, or actually something called a male and something called a female. Not even man or woman, male and female. And that this is supposed to produce, right, offspring. My generation, we were called the baby boom, because there was so much offspring. So much offspring between 1946 and 1964 in the United States. Just families that were big. All right. And then this offspring are supposed to be socialized so that when somebody comes in to the kin group, they come from a pretty identical institution, kin group institution, right? Another family, we might say. And they should match up, right? The transformation should be that each of these offspring develop as male or female, so that eventually, to propagate the unit, they will hook up with the opposite and do it again, right? Right? And then, sort of within the unit, I mean, that's just this sort of crudest cultural I'm going to use hegemonically imposed way to explain the natural process of biological reproduction. So within that also then, there are all of these ways in which the transformation occurs, in which male becomes man and female becomes woman, right? So that binary becomes more and more rigid in all kinds of ways, whether it's pink diapers, right, or war toys, or what have you. Right, so that's just very crude, but gives you an example. So structure is closed, there's transformation within it, and the purpose of that is to be able to reproduce the structure, whatever it is. Kin groups expand, but they also expand through reproduction. But we know, because we're all children of someone, that reproduction is also differentiation, right? We know that whatever people produced us, again, whether or not we know our birth parents, we know that when they produced us, what they did was differentiate. They didn't make themselves again, they made again, but that making again is different. It's me, it's you, it's all of us. Okay. Right. So reproduction is differentiation, and that's where we can think, start to think about this question of selecting and reselecting ancestors that I think is so powerful. So, what Raymond Williams argued in many of his books, but most sort of originally and most eloquently and at greatest length in The Long Revolution, which was published, I think, in 1960 or 61, was that he said every age, every generation, right? So every about 20-year period, 30-year period, has what he called a structure of feeling. So I just talked about structure for a little bit and talked about kin groups for a little bit. A structure of feeling. And in talking about a structure of feeling, he did not mean in any way, in my view, that people all feel the same way, right? Everybody wants Levi's, or everybody wants an iPhone, or everybody wants. That's not it. Because he didn't say there's a typical feeling, or an average feeling, or a hegemonic feeling. He said a structure of feeling. So structure, coming from that cultural critic at that time, tells me, and he goes on to elaborate on his own, that he's thinking about a system, right, a closed system, in which the transformation that people imagine is possible for them in their lives, right, is shaped by a narrative that follows, as all narratives do, a trajectory from stability to instability to stability.